thank you, good night, and God bless you.
Jules Verne, Robert Heinlein, Frank Herbert, and Isaac Asimov, as well as countless others, had already been exploring outer space in their books for years. Asimov created the Galactic Empire as it's known and thought of today, no question about it. His Foundation series is the most influential series of its kind. One of the first films ever produced, centered around space travel. 1902's A Trip to the Moon was directed by George Mells, and can be loosely considered as the first science fiction movie adaptation ever. The short film was inspired by many different works, but much of it was influenced by the work of Jules Verne.
In the vast spectrum of 20th century occult practices, few have garnered as much attention and controversy as the Babylon working ritual. Orchestrated by the enigmatic figures of Jack Parsons, a brilliant rocket scientist and co-founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, and L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, this series of rituals sought to manifest the Thelemic goddess Babylon. Jack Parsons, an ardent follower of Crowley's teachings, believed himself to be a key agent in this coming transformation. While many knew Parsons for his groundbreaking work in rocketry, fewer were aware of his deep engagement with the occult. In early 1946, Parsons was joined by L. Ron Hubbard, an aspiring writer who would later achieve fame or infamy as the founder of Scientology. The two embarked on the Babylon working, drawing from a combination of Thelemic rites, Enochian magic, and their own innovations. Parsons and Hubbard conducted the ritual over several weeks.
There were no rocket programs in America before Jack Parsons. This is paramount to understand. This guy was tapping into Theosophy, Thelema, the religion of Aleister Crowley. He was a disciple of Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, real name Edward Alexander Crowley, born October 1875. Crowley was a famous occultist and practiced magic. He wrote books and poetry and founded the religion of Thelema. He could invoke spirits and demons, and was a master in understanding esoteric knowledge and traditions. Crowley only talks of one instance inside the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and that was in November 1903. As he was in the Great Pyramid around this time and performed rituals there. It was scrawled above the entrance to the chamber mentioning a high priest and high priestess, Atlantis, Apollo, Apollonius of Tyana, and, interestingly, it does seem that a key moment in his life was conducting a magical ritual inside the Great Pyramid, and why some would call him the wickedest man in the world.
There were no rocket programs in America before Jack Parsons. This is paramount to understand. This guy was tapping into Theosophy, Thelema, the religion of Aleister Crowley. He was a disciple of Aleister Crowley. And Hubbard, who was the founder of Scientology. Interestingly, not only did L. Ron Hubbard start Scientology, but he was a science fiction writer. The movie Battlefield Earth with John Travolta, well, that was written by L. Ron Hubbard. Interestingly also, John Travolta is a Scientologist, right? Now, I mention this because this is a man who writes science fiction, yet he started a religion based on science fiction. There has to be something in there where he's getting these clues and these ideas. He's getting these from another realm.
From that point, they ripped a hole open into space-time. And from that point afterwards, you had, regardless of what Parsons actually successfully completed during that with the Whore of Babylon and different things. After that, you had the Roswell incident, you had the Kenneth Arnold sightings, you had in '53 there was the swarm of UFOs that flew over the White House. And so there's this unleashing of supernatural activity that took place after that ritual was performed.
Babylon working was successful according to Jack Parsons. Matter of fact, Parsons said in his Antichrist Manifesto that they were successful.
Just as Parsons and Hubbard sought to channel otherworldly energies through their ritual, society at large became captivated by the notion of otherworldly visitors.
The well-heeled neighborhood is rocked by an enormous explosion.
The emergency crews rush to the scene and they find this absolute devastation.
There's blood everywhere. There's the shattered body of a man on the floor.
He's got a limb severed. He's just incredible injuries.
The fatally wounded man is no ordinary Pasadena resident. This is NASA rocket pioneer Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons, the co-founder of NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab.
Jack Parsons didn't just believe in science, he believed in black magic.
The things he invented started America off on the space race.
April 9th, 1959, NASA introduced the 7 Americans who would travel to infinity and beyond for the first time. The Mercury 7 mission is the foundation of our modern-day space program. The Mercury 7 mission is the foundation of our modern-day space program.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Americans crowd highways and beaches to witness the launch of Apollo 11 from the Kennedy Space Center. On board, astronauts Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
We copy you down, Eagle.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
From the Oval Office, President Nixon watches along with 600 million people worldwide.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
Biggest TV audience ever at that time.
Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
I don't know where any of us would be without all those performances on that stage. The Apollo, it's the beginning of all of it.
Music and art provided an avenue out of the legacy of slavery.
In that summer of 1947, some very peculiar stories started to appear.
Reports that strange flying discs have been whizzing at 1,200 miles an hour over the western United States.
And 3 days later,
8 flying saucers described as more like wash tubs and each about the size of a 5-bedroom house were reported today.
Further south in New Mexico, a 48-year-old rancher named Mac Brazel had made a rather unusual discovery. A large area of wreckage including rubber strips, tin foil, a rather tough paper and sticks. Mac Brazel had heard the reports of flying discs and wondered if the debris he'd found had something to do with that. He spoke to the local sheriff, George Wilcox, who in turn contacted the nearby Roswell Army Airfield. An intelligence officer named Jesse Marcel went with Brazel and Wilcox to the crash site and recovered more material. The following day, the Roswell Army Airfield, known as the RAAF, issued an eye-catching statement.
The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bombing Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County.
The next day's Roswell Daily Record embellished that a bit with the headline, RAAF capture flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. The word disc was mysterious enough, but flying saucer suggested a visitor from another planet. Remember, it was only 9 years since actor Orson Welles had broadcast a radio play about a fictional Martian invasion that had caused something of a panic.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth.
We're going to show you the pyramid is actually in the Bible. Okay, we're going to show you the scripture verses in Isaiah that show this. I want to take a moment to show you this view. This is behind me, the Great Pyramid. At the top of it, there's no top stone. Okay, there's no top stone on this one, and we're going to explain why. It's the Rosh head corner. Okay guys, here's our main verse in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 19. And in that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst or in the middle of the land of Egypt, a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. It shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt.
The names for the Great Pyramid pointed to its purpose. It was known to the Egyptians under the name Kuti, meaning lights. The Chaldean word for pyramid is Uramidin, meaning revelation measures. That the architect intended to bring to light or reveal a message in precision measurements became more and more evident as progressive visits and investigations by archaeologists, astronomers, engineers and mathematicians took place. Measurements on the exterior and interior of the Great Pyramid indicate that the structure was not built in accordance with Egyptian standard measurements. The structure design was based on the sacred, that is the Hebrew cubit, and not the Egyptian or royal cubit. Egyptian records also indicate that strangers to Egypt were responsible for the design of the Great Pyramid. Building on work previously undertaken by Oxford mathematician and astronomer John Greaves in 1649, and French surveyors working under Napoleon in 1798, mathematician, astronomer and publisher John Taylor of London published his 1859 book titled The Great Pyramid, Why Was It Built and Who Built It? He stated the following, quote, "The Great Pyramid was built by non-Egyptian invaders acting under God's guidance," unquote. He went on to state, quote, "Having undertaken extensive measurements and research, it is my belief that it will eventually be found that the Great Pyramid structures, passage system and chambers were intended to indicate and symbolize a prophetic and historical record in relation to biblical revelation," unquote.